Couple things this weekend, this Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm at Schaumburg, at the Chicago Improv. In Schaumburg, Chicago. It's not in Chicago. It's the Schaumburg Improv. It's a great club. I got a show on Thursday. I got 2 shows Friday. I got 2 shows Saturday. Get your tickets at bryancallen.com. I'm bringing heat. I'm writing new stuff. So if you watch my special, Man Tears, which you should, this is new. And thank you for all the comments and the love I'm getting on Man Tears. The next weekend, actually November 10th, 11th, 12th, I'm at the Comedy Zone in Charlotte, North Carolina. Then I'm in Addison, Texas, Addison Improv, November 17, 18, 19. Then Naples, Florida, Off the Hook Comedy Club, December 1, 2, 3, and 4. If anybody is good at videography, I might need a videographer in Schaumburg. Hit me up. DM me on my Instagram or hit me up at bryancallen@gmail.com. As usual, this podcast brought to you by Toehold, the best flip-flops on planet Earth. We actually have been selling so many, we had to shut down production for Christmas, so I apologize if you're trying to order things. We didn't shut down production, we had to shut down orders because we are catching up on all the orders we have. Because I think people are starting to see that these are, well, you really only need one pair for life. I can't stop wearing them. Every time I give them to people, Rogan just sent me a picture of his feet in them. I win everybody over because once you start wearing them, you will not stop. It's just the way the leather is, Wickett and Craig leather. And it just molds to your feet. And I would get some for Dylan, but he has some weird thing called excoriation syndrome. Now, without further ado, let's get into some important stuff.
Bryan Callen, this is his intro song. Bryan Callen, it's one hell of an intro song. His comedy is marvelous. He's a genius in world politics.
Let's go through some life lessons from the 55-year-old. Let's go through some life lessons from the 55-year-old who doesn't do life properly, okay? Because what I am emotional. So if I owned a big company, I'm sure I'd be shut down and canceled right away for creating a toxic work environment because I tend to yell generally when I'm upset. Now, I'm not yelling at people, but I just yelled at my wife or in my wife's direction about someone else. And so my wife had to take all my toxic energy. You know, she's trying to manage a baby and I'm throwing toxic energy her way because I'm mad about something over here. So she's got to deal with all that while taking care of a kid. Yeah. And then I call and I apologize. I apologize and start justifying why I shot all my energy at her. And as I'm doing that, I call very calm. I go, I'm sorry. And then this is how the conversation goes. I go, I'm sorry that I shouldn't have been yelling in your direction, but this fucking bullshit can't be this way because, well, I've only been doing this for 25 fucking, and I start popping my fucks. This fucking, you hear me do that, fuck, you hear there's a hollow like that. This fucking bullshit. If I start talking like that, and I use a lot of fucking fucks, fuck, if you see me bite my lower lip and I go, this is the kind of fucking bullshit that fucking pisses me off, that's when I'm really mad. But it's also when I'm generally mad and I'm saying shit that I know I'm going to regret, that I know is not helpful, but I'm getting rid of energy. I'm getting rid of the cobra of hate that's swirling. It starts in my belly, and then it starts to swirl up in my chest. And the only way I can get his venom out, because he's chock full of venom, is by fucking saying fuck a lot at people. Here's the bottom line. Don't be a scattergun. I'm a scattergun, okay? I shoot bird pellets into the sky. Successful people, don't do that. Successful people are snipers. They get the problem in their crosshairs. They take their time, and then they set their breathing. And when you shoot, and I learned this from a Delta Force sniper, when you shoot, when you got your target in your crosshairs, it's all about how you breathe. Watch this. I'm breathing in. I'm going to breathe out. And at the end of my breath, that's when I'm going to pull the trigger. Now watch how nothing moves on my hand. I'm just going to go, watch this. Did you see that? I stroked the trigger with my index finger. My index finger is the only fucking thing that moved on my hand. I trusted the rifle. That's success. What Bryan Callen does is he takes a shotgun, points it to the sky when there are birds he thinks out the corner of his eyes. Could be a paper bag floating in the wind, but whatever. And I just go, hey, gosh, gosh. And I close my eyes and go, did I hit anything? And I'm using these metaphors because I'm back from London, the outskirts of London. My buddy was kind enough to host me. Host me. He had a bird shoot. Now, for anybody who has a judgment on killing pheasant and partridge, check yourself, okay? Check yourself, because you eat chicken. And chicken, you have no idea where your chicken comes from. You have no idea. Could be from China, and it probably is. And I'm sure the Chinese treat their chickens with a lot of humanity. But this is a harvest. I participated in a harvest where people beat the bushes and they send the partridge and the pheasant overhead, and you take them out. Now here's the thing: you got to lead the bird. You got to lead the bird. This is a technique. And I slaughtered a lot of birds. It was an avian slaughter. I'm not gonna lie. I ate them all. But I had an amazing experience as well. Not 1 hour after I'd gotten off the plane and got to my friend's estate, not 1 hour was I prone with a roebuck. A roebuck is a small deer, delicious meat. They overrun his property, so he has to manage them. He has to cull them. I had a roebuck in my sights with this unbelievable rifle, this Blauser. Rifle cost something like 40 grand. I have no idea. I squeezed a round off, perfect shot.
Thing didn't, Bryan is stone dead.
Stone dead.
Stone dead. Come on, we'll go up there. We don't even have to wait. I fucking saw the thing.
I dropped it.
You dropped it.
So that's a Blauser. That's a $40,000 rifle or something crazy. And I dropped that bad boy from across that ravine, across that valley. And it was it was a dead shot. You see all the way over there? No, you don't, because that's how far away it is. You need a high-powered scope. I dropped that deer, though. I don't like shooting a deer through the lungs or the heart because you can mess the meat up, and also I want them to die quickly. So I'll try to hit the heart or the top of the spine. Sometimes you can even do a headshot. Either way, I will say, I believe every time I've shot a deer, I've dropped it immediately because I make sure I take my shot when I know for sure it's within my capabilities. I'm talking like a sniper now. But then here's the best part. I picked the deer up. I threw it over my shoulders. And I hoofed it. I fucking hoofed it about 1,000 yards, maybe more, to my buddy's shed. When I say shed, it's the size of most people's houses, but it's a deer processing shed. It's where he processes a lot of his meat. And my body was sore. My ass and my legs were sore because I was in peat moss or whatever it is, whatever that boggy soil is in the English countryside because it rains a lot. But what really was sore was my ankles and my lower calves. You get older and you get weird soreness in different places. But the bottom line is at 55. I can hoof my own food out. I can harvest my own meat. No assistance necessary. No assistance necessary here. Thank you. Could have dragged it out with my buddy. You grab one hoof, he grabs the other, and you drag it. I said, nay. Out of respect, let me throw this deer over my big old back. By the way, I have my back in relation to the rest of my body, fairly vast. So people say, Bri, how come you can do so many pull-ups? How can you do so many strict pull-ups? I blame my back. It's not about my biceps. It's in my back. So, there's something about hunting, the value of hunting, is that I'm profoundly uneasy. With taking a life, whether it's a bird or a deer. That's the truth. I actually don't like it. I don't, but it makes me, when I dress it myself, when I have to remove the vitals, prepare the meat, butcher it, it gives me not only a crazy amount of respect for what it takes to feed yourself, but also in many ways, it makes me, it kind of brings me closer to the concept of life and death. I think the Native Americans or any of the indigenous people who had to do this on a daily basis, who are up close and personal, when you have to kill an animal with a spear, with a bow and arrow, with a knife, when you have to trap it and then end its life, you hear that thing breathing. You feel that thing. You feel its life force go away. That brings you closer to the idea that life is temporary, that human beings are exactly the same way. Whether or not you believe they have a soul or not, the truth is the problem of life is that a human being can be shut off easier even. And when you're cutting through a deer's skin, right? Deer has much thicker skin than you do. But man, is it easy. Man, is it easy. And you realize that basically we're balloons. You muscular? How much do you bench? How much do you squat? How much do you deadlift? Oh, that's cool. Black belt in what? That's great. That's awesome. Couple guns? Good. You're a balloon. And I can open you up. I can unzip you. This is knife terminology. This is, in the knife circles, we call it unzipping somebody. What, Dylan?
You're not in knife circles.
You don't know if I'm in knife circles, bro. All right? In the knife circles, and I shouldn't be talking this way, I'll unzip you with the weight of my hand if I got the right blade. Boom. It's just that. We got problems. It's that lazy jab. Boop, boop. Now your body is going to lose it can't regulate. If you don't get to a hospital toot sweet, pronto, you die. All right? That's how easy it is. So it brings you very close to the concept of life and death. And that's what's very difficult for a human being. I believe that the overall problem with being a human being is realizing how difficult it is to build something like yourself, to build understanding, to build knowledge, to build skill. Like it takes a lifetime. It's so delicate to build peace of mind. Huh? How many of y'all who are listening have peace of mind? And it can all be ended so easily just with a lazy trigger finger, or just a lazy jab, or a lazy slash. Isn't that maddening? Yet you must go on. Yet that's the point. Yet you are limited. You are that delicate, that fragile, but you have unlimited potential. You have unlimited power. Isn't that crazy? That might be the difference between a human being and an animal. Dude, I'm laying some truth down. Range. I'm here to talk about range, speaking of accomplishments. This guy, David Epstein, wrote a book called Range. And in a world of specialization, when you're trying to get really good at something, the idea would be my kid's going to be the best tennis player, best violinist or whatever. Let's have them start practicing at 5 and only practice the violin 4 hours a day, only practice tennis 5 hours a day. David Epstein did a whole study on the fact that the best in the world typically do a lot of things when they're starting out. And they only specialize later on in life. So that's the book that me and the great Ben Askren in my segment Books with Ben are going to do. I'm going to break that down. So without further ado, I give you Range. Bryan Callen, Ben Askren, break down the book Range with Books with Ben. All right, well listen, Ben, we're gonna review the book Range by David Epstein. Is that his name?
Yeah.
I've had dinner with David.
I don't know if it's Epstein or Epstein, but
yeah, I've had dinner with him.
Relation.
Yep, I had dinner with him and I interviewed him about this book. And I want to talk to you about Range because his thesis is that there's this idea that to be really good at something, you need to specialize from an early age. So it's like the Tiger Woods model, right? He was like 3 years old, swinging a club, beating guys at 6. And there is a school for that. But what David Epstein found through his research is that most of the people like Roger Federer and the great athletes and the great musicians even, etc., sampled in a lot of different things. I mean, Federer played every sport there was. There are a lot of musicians that learned how to play every instrument until they specialized on one. And so there's this idea that, when you've played all the sports, you'll when you finally decide to figure out how to, emphasize, focus on one sport, you'll be better at that one sport. But more importantly, he talks about the world being so interconnected and how if you don't sample and learn about a lot of things, you're going to be lost. You can't be a good, investor. You can't be a good investor without really understanding how to do pretty much everything. So a lot of times you have to have a broad range of knowledge in things. But I want to talk to you because as a wrestler, obviously, you never took a day off and you specialized from a very young age and obviously became an Olympic wrestler and then made MMA history.
Yeah,
so what do you think?
Wait, do we want to talk about me? I got look at all these notes I got, Brian. I made so many notes. I
love it.
I got my book right here. I went through it because it had been a few years, and I wanted to really refresh my memory on. I kind of thought I remembered what it said, but I wanted to make sure I was refreshed on it, and I feel good. I feel like there's a whole bunch of interesting points that I would like to discuss and get your opinion on too. So I don't know if you want to talk about me first or the points first.
I want to hear your points and I want to hear what you think and if you agree.
Yeah. So okay. So his thesis is that late specialization is better in everything, and obviously there's gonna be an anomaly like I say a Tiger Woods, but he said it's probably more likely if you're a later starter and you sample more things. And one of the biggest things, I actually have this written down. He said, out of college that winners quit fast and often. And so that's kind of like this sampling process. And so he essentially says the more you sample something, whether it's sports or instruments or jobs, the more likely you are to find the one that fits you best. And I thought that was like, wow, like that's probably the number one thing I would say that hit me the hardest after kind of rereading this is like, that's so smart, but so few people think of that. There's so many people who pick one thing and they just go there and they don't even sample anything else. So how do they know that they weren't better suited for something else?
Yeah, that might be called education. Literally, like if you're aware, for example, of how other people are way more like you than not. So like people who don't know anything about Arabic culture, Arabic history, or Arabic people, and they've never been to Iraq, they've never been anywhere in the Middle East. You're likely to believe things like this. You hear people say, well, they don't take human life as seriously as you do. You hear that shit. Then when you live there, you go, oh, that's not true at all. If anything, they take it more seriously. And then but we do that when we see tragedy in places like Syria, and we go, I don't want to think of it that way. They don't die the way we do. They don't love their kids the way we do. It's way easier to handle. If you're looking at people that are exactly like you and suffering, you can't sleep at night. So when you educate yourself, and you tend maybe sometimes to become, at least you have a broader understanding, and maybe you become more compassionate. Education will it will create sort of a macro perspective in general. I don't know.
I think that's right. But so like for sports, for me, I think I did everything available to me. And I eventually went down to wrestling only, and that was at age either 14 or 15. So it did take a while to get there. But for you, let me ask you, how many different types of jobs have you had? I think it's mostly been show business, but between actor, comedian, podcaster, how many of those types of things have you had?
Yeah, well, first of all of them, writer, trying to write screenplays, working at McDonald's, working construction, selling Time Life books, all the jobs you can think of, I did in that sense, but working as a waiter in New York City, working behind the counter in New York City, whatever it was. When you're younger, you're doing all those things. But then you come to Hollywood and you realize, holy shit, dude, I can't just be an actor, because there's nothing about me physically that's going to get people to go, let's get that medium white guy in our movie. Nobody gives a fuck. I wasn't even that talented, to be honest with you. So then I was like, well, I'm funny and I can be silly, but then trying to be a comic, if you want to be a good comic, you've got to know a lot about a lot of things. You got to have a social awareness. You got to know what the zeitgeist is talking about so you can have something in common with your audience. And then you have to know about your own nature and human nature. And then what happens is you write, you're on your 5th special like me. So if I got to write another hour of comedy. Well, am I asking the same questions over and over again? Am I going to repeat myself? The biggest worry now for me is repeating myself, is doing the same thing. No. I gotta write from a fresh perspective. Well, what do I do then? And Bill Burr talks about this. Bill Burr says, if you want to start writing again and you want to be a good comic, pick up a discipline that's difficult to learn. That's why I learned how to fly the helicopter. That's why I learned how to play the drums. Like, do something, take a cooking class, get back into jujitsu. If I'm doing shit that's jogging my brain and I suck at, it's going to change how I look at the world, and that's the best thing I can do for my comedy.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, let me hit you with this one, because I think this one, I don't want to get too political, but this might take us somewhere political real quick. In chapter 2, they talk about where you have an immediate feedback loop, such as golf, tennis, like disc golf, wrestling, fighting. These things are immediate feedback loop. You try something, and then very, very immediately you get the result.
Stand-up's that way. Are people laughing or not? Stand-up's that way. Are people laughing or not? You'll figure it out. Yeah.
In this case, you get better with time because you're getting immediate feedback. But they said, and I've read this other places as well, but this one just jogged my memory. If you're in professions where you don't get immediate feedback, like an economic forecaster or a weather person, or a lot of political pundits, for example, where they're not getting immediate feedback and the answer is not it's not precise. Like, for example, in MMA, if you shoot a bad takedown, sometimes you get kneed in the head, right? You get very precise feedback on what the hell you're doing. Whereas you're an economic forecaster, you could argue whether you're right or wrong. You could debate, you could say all these kinds of things. Well, this happened, I didn't expect it. If that didn't happen, then I would have been right. But in these fields, he calls them wicked learning environments.
Yeah.
The people who are experts and they're siloed in that field for longer often get worse. And when I thought of that, I thought about the people who are making these predictions about the coronavirus and other things.
And the economy. And how often wrong they were. Yes. I sent my father a really interesting, comprehensive analysis by this global strategist about how Peter Zehan, really smart guy, about how China is fucked, Germany's fucked, the world's fucked, the United States is going to do really well. And China may not exist in the next 10 years, according to him. And my father, my dad at 82, my dad at 82 said, yeah, I know. I've been listening to these things forever. I got out of the future telling business in my 40s because I watched how many experts were wrong over and over again. So he won't even entertain it, because what he said was that one thing about human beings is that when faced with a problem, don't underestimate their ability to innovate their way out of it. And don't underestimate the presence of black swans, of unforeseen events, and invention that changes everything. Nobody saw fracking. Fracking was a huge thing that created energy independence in the United States. It just goes on and on.
What's his name's book? I told you about this guy. Oh my God, how am I blanking? His name, you know what? His name is Alex Epstein, no relation to the author of the current book.
Yeah. Well, so sometimes this is what happens when you get into when you look at the future. Anybody who predicts the future is making we all make this fundamental mistake. We assume it's all based on the criteria we know of today. So yes. So it becomes harder and harder. But look, trying to stay relevant as a comic in a TikTok world, I've got to constantly learn, unlearn, and relearn. I've got to constantly be doing whatever the fuck is working. We're all watching each other. We're all going, oh, do I have to put clips of crowd work on? I got my special. Nobody's watching my special all the way through. Most people are watching pieces. I know, so did TJ Miller. I just did a podcast. I was like, he was so nice about it.
You were TJ Miller. He was on the Funky Crypto Show, and I actually watched him at the Improv. He was really funny. He's
fucking great. He's fucking great. But I was so impressed that another comic watched my whole special all the way through. But that's very rare. Most people don't have time. So it's all changing, and it's always going to always change. That's the one constant. Change is the one constant. So how do you predict? How do you get better? Man, life is one continuous mistake. And one of the things he talks about in the book is that the only way to get deep learning is slowly. The only way to actually build real acumen, meaning real skill, is slowly and over a long time. You don't get to be a wrestler of your level, I don't give a fuck who you are, without wrestling forever. It's pattern recognition. It's not shooting a takedown or a double leg. It's when you shoot the double leg. When do you shoot the double leg? When do you transition? What is your chain wrestling? One of the reasons people couldn't keep up with Khabib, God, I would have loved to have seen you wrestle with Khabib. But one of the things that people couldn't figure out with Khabib was basically how he was able to, his transitions were impossible. He was speaking a different language. I want to know, did you ever salivate at wrestling Khabib when you watched him do what he did?
Love to be able to grapple or work out with him. I never got to work out with him on any level, so that was unfortunate.
When you watched him, was it a mystery? Was he doing shit you hadn't seen before?
No, it was very precise. He just had a really good blueprint of where he wanted to go and what it was going to be, and it was he was very dominant in those positions.
It would have been a crazy wrestling. It would have been a crazy fight, you and him. Yeah. I think you're bigger, maybe, but I don't know.
Hey, let's talk about. I got all kinds of points that I was said. Okay, this one from I believe is chapter 4. They studied the Air Force calculus teachers. Okay, and so they studied them in real time, how they did it in that class, and what the reviews were like, and then they studied how those people did in future classes. Okay, I thought this was really fascinating. So the teachers who were able to get their kids to get really good grades also got really good reviews from the students. However, those students generally did worse in the future than teachers who didn't boost their kids' grades and who got worse performance reviews. This one, I remember the first time reading through this, it kind of blew my mind, and it really didn't make a whole lot of sense. But then the more I thought about it, the more it made sense from a wrestling coach. A wrestling coach's job is to make a kid struggle through things so they build skills and adapt and become better later, as opposed to making them have a lot of success with really some easy shortcut type way.
Yeah. So you're saying the calculus teachers that got the best reviews and had the best grades for their students had the best grades, and then those kids did better later on?
No, did worse. They
Why?
had the best grades in that class.
Yeah.
So what he was talking about in the chapter was that oftentimes he was specifying American teachers, but they brought up some other countries also. But he was saying American teachers are uncomfortable with making the kids struggle, and so they want to give them these answers or easy.
Oh, yes.
as opposed to making them struggle to get the answer.
Yeah, you won't see that in China. You're gonna have to fucking struggle through it, and then once you figure that out, you'll get it. Yeah.
So that I thought that was really fascinating to think about, because I think it's probably the opposite of how most people think about it. And I think about in youth wrestling sometimes, like I would say there are cheat codes, and we kind of really push back on that as a way to make kids better earlier that are more negative, like down the road. So if we're talking like a 9 through 12-year-old, I can make them good at that point in time, but the things I do to make them good then are going to be more negative than say from 15 to 18.
Really? And so why? Because you're teaching them shortcuts and not the fundamentals, or not the base?
Yeah, essentially you can spend because most 9 to 12-year-olds, no matter who they are really bad at wrestling. And so these like sneaky cheap moves will work on them, and then you become heavily reliant on those moves that work against subpar, right, lower level wrestlers. But eventually over time, people raise their level. And then if you become really reliant on a handful of techniques that don't work when you get to this next level, you get to the next level and you're like, wait, why doesn't any of this stuff work anymore?
That's why that's like boxing flashy boxers. Guys like remember Nassim what the fuck, the Prince Nassim. Yeah, and he was flashy as shit and then he got Barrera, the babyface assassin, who was a fundamentalist when it came to boxing. Fundamentalist, just perfect shot, and all that shit didn't work. All that shit went out the window. It's really interesting because it's true. It's like you can get away with certain things. Like I remember watching when Yair Rodriguez, who's fucking a killer now, but when he first came into the UFC and he was doing that flashy Taekwondo shit, Schaub said doesn't work against the better guys. And I can't believe they gave this amazing kid to Frankie Edgar. You can't give it to Frankie Edgar, who is a wrestler boxer, because Frankie just took him, double-legged him, and pounded his fucking head in before Yair was ready. He hadn't done enough wrestling. He wasn't ready. And it's like, why ruin that kid then? And he's, and it was true. It was like that flash didn't work yet. He had to kind of come back down to the base of wrestling and the things that are the fundamental, sort of like the bedrock you can anchor into.
Yeah, absolutely. So since we got an MMA, I really thought that, and this is chapter 5, but I wrote that chapter 5. Oh, is that me or you? All right. Chapter 5 is really indicative. Are we still good?
Yeah.
Chapter 5 is really, it's like MMA to me. So it's talking about essentially if you have people coming from a lot of different genres and a lot of different fields, you're more likely to get the right answer because you're gonna have all these different ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And so if you think about like how MMA started, MMA in the very beginning was like, well, what discipline's the best? Let's do this one versus that one and see what happens. Yeah. Right. And everyone was fascinated by the concept. And so now you think about it in 2022 terms, and it's like, okay, what if a jiu-jitsu guy never learned anything else and just kept thinking he had the right tools to win an MMA fight with just jiu-jitsu? No wrestling, nothing, just jiu-jitsu. It would be pretty preposterous, right? Or a boxer thinking he could win in MMA, just boxing.
Yep.
Right. But the correct answer now over the course of 30 years came from how do we combine all these things, like, right? Judo, wrestling, sambo.
By the way, that's a fighter versus a boxer. That's a fighter versus a jiu-jitsu player. That's a fighter versus a judoka. That's a fighter versus a wrestler.
Well, I think in the beginning, before we actually saw what would happen, I think there was probably a lot of people who falsely believed that a specialist in a single domain could actually win in that environment. Well,
but see, you're bringing up a very important point, because we have this disease in academia. We have this disease at think tanks. Take a look at how often economists are wrong because they're only looking at things like from a macro perspective and all that. Take a look at how often, what are academics who teach kids? Academics who are teaching kids that everything is racist or everything is this, that, and the other thing. They live behind a very expensive wall. They teach one fucking subject. They're not broad in their, I've talked to them. They're not broad. First of all, they're not living in the real world. They're not having to make a business work, for example. That's a major liability when you're trying to get to the truth. So, this is why I think MMA is a great metaphor for life. You should be a mixed mental artist a mixed mental artist. You should be a mixed mental. It's not just mixed martial arts. Like mixed martial arts is a great metaphor for how you should live your life, man. This is where range comes in. You have to learn all the different disciplines, or at least understand them. And one of the cool things about doing anything, whether it's jiu-jitsu or learning the guitar, is most of the world's a dark room. But when you learn something, you get a flashlight and they let you kind of look around for a second, and the mystery of the world and when you get really good at something, we've talked about this, when you get really good at one thing and you watch somebody who's an amazing tennis player or you watch somebody who's an amazing pianist, at least you have an understanding of how they got there. Like you understand, like you have something in common with each other, you know? And that's kind of the value of getting really good at something. So what did you disagree with in the book? What did you disagree with in the book? We want to make these fast.
Well, I mean, I do think for sports and you know what? And part of me says maybe I'm not even disagreeing, really. Is I think for specific sports, maybe it's earlier, like a 12, 13, 14 is when I think a kid should start really like kind of ramping up on the wrestling if they want to be good, because and part of this is because there are time restrictions, right? So in order for a kid to be really high level wrestling in the United States, generally has to go to a good college. And generally, if he's going to a good college, he's probably getting recruited as a sophomore, junior, right? So that's age, we'll say 15, 16, somewhere in there. And so in order to be good enough at that age, he's going to have to start ramping up at 12, 13, or 14, something like that. And this is actually why I hate women's gymnastics, because I feel like in order to be good at that, you got to ramp up at like age 7.
Yeah, you have to be in China and in a gymnastics farm and be taken away from your family and train all day. Yeah.
But so I think for certain people,
ice skating too.
Being a comedian, there's no time limit on it, right? But for certain things, like say being a high level wrestler in the United States, like you're probably gonna have to have a relatively high level proficiency by age, we'll say 15, 16. And in order to do that, you're gonna have to really start kind of like ramping it up. Now, I think I'm even kind of more moderate. I think there's a lot of people who want to do it at like age 7, 8, 9. I don't want to do that, right? I think kids should be playing other sports, but I do think there is that time where they probably should be ramping it up a little bit. And that's kind of where I'm like, maybe I'm not totally disagreeing with them. Maybe I'm just saying it should be a few years early. And we're talking about circumstances that are also out of our control, you know, the college recruitment process.
You know what I'm beginning to think? I'm beginning to think that being a winner and being a guy at your level might be in some ways inherent. Like, you know, like, well, no, I don't mean it that way. I just mean like, I know that you don't believe talent exists. I love that. And I love that as a philosophy. I love it as a philosophy for everybody because it keeps you on point. But like sometimes I think that, like I was talking to the guys who opened for me on the road, you know, by the way, I'll be at Bridgeport Stress Factory this weekend. Schaumburg Improv at the end of the month. But Chicago Improv. But I was saying to them, look, man, success and making it as a headliner and as a comic, that's a mindset. There's no time to waste. You have no time. If you think you have no time and you are trying to be the best you can be and actually shock yourself with how good you can be, which is what you have to do. Like you have to see that and then go for it. That's what you have to do. There's no time to be relaxed. It's probably a bad idea to think you have time for fucking anything, even though it does take forever. And I don't know, man, like sometimes how you visualize yourself in the grand pantheon of life, how you visualize yourself, like the kind of competitive nature you have in your heart. And the idea that I'm not going to be I will not be second place no matter what. That might be the most important thing. So range, yes. Specialization, yes. Talent doesn't exist, yes. But if you don't have that thing that you can't describe, I'm afraid it ain't for you. So I don't know, man. Maybe that's just how you see yourself. That's my assessment of the book.
I wrote this note down. Actually, this note was kind of for my wife because I know she would laugh about this, but you made me think of it when you were just talking. So I'll read you the sentence and the footnote from page 27. It said, for more than 50 years, psychiatrist Daryl Teffert, that's a weird ass name, studied savants, individuals with an insatiable drive to practice in one domain and ability in that area that far outstrips their abilities in other areas. Islands of genius, as Teffert calls it. And then in the, it's got a little asterisk, you know, and then down on the bottom, this is why my wife would laugh. About half of savants are autistic, and many others have a disability, but not all do. So that's one of the when they denote the Asperger's autism stuff. It's very specified interest, and that's where my wife, she gets frustrated because sometimes I get locked in on a thing, and this is like all I want to think about or all I want to do. Yeah. Well, I find you to be really remarkable because you surprise the shit out of me with your breadth of your appetite for knowledge and your appetite for all the different big ideas. So I want to keep these book reviews 15 minutes. We've already gone over. I want to keep these short. Oh, go. Give me the close this up. Close this up. Let's go. It's not a closing thought, but I'll give it. No, but I like it. I like it. Let's go. This is great. And this goes along with the winners quit often and fast and trying different stuff. I think American society has something against this mentality, and they see it as someone being flaky. And where I was really thinking about it a lot, and I'm really happy in this. It is changing kind of rapidly in athletes' rights and NCAA competitions and recruitment. But people ask a 16 to 18-year-old kid to commit to a college on a 48-hour visit somewhere. And they think that these 16, 18-year-old kids should be making these decisions on where they should be for the next 5 years. It's freaking preposterous. And, you know, and then if a kid commits somewhere when they're 16 and then age 17, they're like, hey, I don't really think that's the place for me. And they go somewhere else. People are like, oh my gosh, what a traitor. How flaky. Why would he do this? And then, or if they go to college for a year and they said, you know what? I kind of liked that on my recruiting trip, but I kind of hated it and I want to go somewhere else. They're like, oh, what a traitor. That kid's such a flake. Why would he do that? And so I thought about like this, it just makes sense. Like, honestly, like why, if you don't like something, you should go find the place that fits for you, right? Go find the best fit for yourself. Winners quit often and fast. I think that's a direct quote from the book. Winners quit often and fast. Yeah. This isn't for me. Moving on. That can be applied to the people in your fucking life. And I never do that. But the people I know that are really, successful go, that guy's a fucking idiot, not worth my time, see you later, boom. Rogan is the world heavyweight champion of that shit. Rogan is the world heavyweight. Rogan will be like, that guy's a fucking moron, get him away from me. He's amazing that way. He'd see a girl and he'd be like, that girl's crazy, get away from her, she's gonna ruin your life. I'd be like, I should have listened to him 1,000 times. But he has an instinct. That motherfucker has an instinct like nobody's business. Me, I'd be like, I love everybody. Bring it in. Come to my house and live there. You know. That's so funny. Yeah, my wife hates it when I do that also. There are a few people where I've said I'm not so sure. She's like, you're so mean. Why would you say that about that person? And then like 6 months later, she finds something out and she's like, damn it, you were right again. And I'm there like, you go. Are you ever gonna start trusting me? That's to your credit. All right, Ben Askren, this has been awesome. That was Range. We're gonna keep these things tight. I love having you on this because you've lived such a life. So it's great. I hope you guys got what it's about. Yes, Range, but not necessarily. Range, the generalist triumph. All right, buddy. You're the best. Ben Askren, this has been Books with Ben.